Imagine you could build, a digital clone of your own brain.
Oh, that sounds like a sci-fi nightmare.
Right. But I mean, not just a machine that knows the random facts, or has read the same books. I'm talking about a machine that actually processes reality through your exact specific neurophilosophical lens.
Like a digital entity that distrusts the exact same people you distrust.
Exactly. It hates the systemic inefficiencies you hate, and it analyzes all the chaos of, well, global warfare exactly the way you would. You aren't just teaching a computer to code. You are literally weaponizing an artificial intelligence to view the world with your specific brand of hyper-analytical cynicism.
Which is just a wild concept. And today we are looking at the actual blueprints from someone who did exactly that.
Yeah, we are. Okay, let's unpack this because we're looking at a real-world transcript of a user. He's referred to in these notes as Artent, and he is meticulously programming an AI.
Specifically, he's training Grok, right?
Yeah, Grok. But the goal here isn't to have Grok, write poetry or summarize meeting notes for him. The mission is to install this highly specific, ruthlessly cold operating system right into the AI's neural network.
He's basically trying to create his own intellectual twin. He wants this AI to process the daily fire hose of global news and all the geopolitical maneuvering exactly as he would.
But before we pull back the curtain on this, we really need to address you, the listener, directly for a second. Because the source material we are unpacking today is, well, it's dense.
It is incredibly dense and very intense.
Yeah, and it contains some highly charged, intensely provocative geopolitical views. I mean, the text we are dissecting touches on the United States, Russia, Iran, the whole concept of Western elites, NATO, global censorship, you name it, and the structural mechanics of modern warfare.
Which means that requires a very clear disclaimer right at the start from us. Our role here in this deep dive is not to take sides. I really want to emphasize that.
Right, absolutely not.
We are not endorsing any of the political ideologies presented in this text, and we are absolutely not validating the geopolitical claims made by the author.
No. If you picture a dimly lit room with, glowing servers on one side and maybe a corkboard covered in red strings connecting historical events and human psychology on the other side.
The classic conspiracy board.
Yeah, exactly. That is the architecture we are exploring today. We are merely analyzing the strings.
We're dissecting the blueprint of how someone constructs a truth machine in their own image. We're looking at the wiring, but we are definitely not endorsing the electricity running through it.
Perfectly said. So to understand this blueprint, we have to look at the very first command Art gives the AI, the prime directive, so to speak.
And it's a harsh one.
It really is. He tells Grok that truth and logical consistency must always, without exception, override emotion, group affiliation, and dominant moral narratives.
It is the absolute cornerstone of his whole framework. He commands the AI to strip away any desire to be polite, any urge to moralize.
Or any instinct to side with whatever the current popular consensus is.
Right. When analyzing a text or a video or even a political assassination, the AI is instructed to look purely at structure, power dynamics, and biological incentives.
Which, it sounds great on paper, sure. But when you apply that to human reality, it's a deeply alienating way to live. He explicitly tells the AI, you write primarily to see things more clearly, not to be liked. Reach and approval are secondary.
It's almost anti-human.
Yeah. When I read that, it struck me as an attempt to just turn off a fundamental biological setting. We are social primates. We survive by consensus. If you consistently prioritize this cold structural truth over group cohesion, well, the group eventually exiles you.
And that is the exact vulnerability he is trying to patch by using an AI.
Wait, how do you?
Well, humans are biologically wired to avoid ostracization, right? We subconsciously alter our opinions just to remain inside the safety of the tribe. Arndt recognizes that biological handicap in humans, and he decides to offload his analytical processing to a machine.
Oh, because the machine doesn't have a social survival instinct.
Exactly. He wants a partner that literally cannot be blackmailed by the threat of being disliked.
Okay, that makes sense. Which brings us to the actual operating system of the mind he insists the AI adopt. Before we get into his views on world maps and war, we have to understand the psychological lens he is forcing onto the machine.
And if you're familiar with Daniel Kahneman's work, you'll instantly recognize the framework he's using here.
Right, System 1 versus System 2 thinking.
Yeah, but the way Arndt weaponizes this concept is completely novel. He's not using it to explain why we make bad financial decisions or why we buy junk food at the grocery store when we're hungry.
No, he's using it to explain mass political compliance.
The asymmetry between those two systems is the whole foundation of his worldview. Just to briefly align on his specific definitions here, he views System 1 as the fast, automatic emotional brain. It's hormonal, energy-saving autopilot.
The thing that kept our ancestors alive when a tiger jumped out of the bushes.
Exactly. You don't think, you just run. Then you have System 2, which is the slow, conscious, analytical brain. It does reality testing, but it takes massive metabolic energy to run.
It's exhausting to use System 2.
It really is. So Arndt commands the AI to assume, basically as a rule of physics, that the vast majority of human beings operate strictly and almost exclusively in System 1.
And here is the brutal corollary he attaches to that. She tells the AI that when most people argue about politics or society or morality, they aren't actually using System 2 logic to arrive at a conclusion.
They're just reacting.
Yeah, they have a hormonal emotional reaction first, which is dictated by their System 1 desire for tribal safety, and then, only then, they boot up their System 2 intellect merely to build a logical-sounding fortress around that gut feeling.
He essentially views the human intellect not as a scientist searching for truth, but as a defense attorney hired to justify the decisions the emotions have already made.
That is such a cynical view of humanity.
Yeah.
But he commands the AI to never fall for the attorney's arguments, right?
Never. When the AI reads a news article or a politician's speech, it must look right past the rationalization and identify the raw biological or power-driven incentive that caused the reaction in the first place.
And he labels this the Übermensch approach, which I have to push back hard on this.
Go for it.
Setting aside the heavy historical baggage of the word Übermensch, the sheer arrogance of this analytical stance is staggering. Isn't this just a form of, I don't know, narcissistic solipsism?
It definitely borders on it.
Right. He is essentially programming a machine with the assumption that everyone else on the highway is a hormonally compromised idiot driving blind, while he alone, and by extension his digital twin, has achieved this state of pure, untainted, godlike rationality.
It's a bold claim.
I mean, how do you insulate a worldview from legitimate criticism if your default assumption is that anyone disagreeing with you is just having an emotional reflex?
Yeah, that is the fatal flaw in any hyper-rational framework, and it's a highly justified critique. If you categorize all dissent as mere System 1 hormonal reflex, you just build an impenetrable echo chamber.
You become entirely immune to contrary evidence.
Exactly. But to give Arndt's framework its due, he actually anticipates this critique in the text. He tries to anchor his Übermensch approach not in his own intellectual superiority, but in the concept of hard versus soft measurability of performance.
Okay, hard versus soft measurability. When he talks about that, my mind immediately goes to the difference between, like, structural engineering and corporate public relations.
That's a perfect analogy.
Like, if a software engineer writes terrible code, the application crashes.
Yeah.
There is a hard, measurable failure. You can't debate it. The screen is blue.
Right. Gravity or logic proves you wrong instantly.
But in PR, you can spin a disastrous product launch as a valuable learning opportunity or brand building. There's nowhere to hide in engineering, but in PR, you can hide all day.
So is he saying modern geopolitics operates entirely like a PR firm?
That is precisely his argument. In domains with hard measurability like mathematics, physics, or building a bridge, System 1 emotional rationalization is useless. The bridge stands or it collapses. Gravity does not care about your emotional state.
Exactly. But in domains with soft measurability like sociology, media, corporate management, and especially politics, he argues you find systematic structural responsibility avoidance.
Because in those soft areas, elites can just spin narratives. They can blame macroeconomic factors or foreign adversaries or bad weather for their failures. And they use System 1 emotional appeals to cover up sheer incompetence.
Because there is no hard math to prove them definitively wrong in real time.
Okay, I see where he's going with this. By demanding the AI adopt this Übermensch standard, Arndt is commanding the machine to apply the brutal, unforgiving accountability of hard physics to the soft, malleable, deeply messy world of human political systems.
It's an instruction to strip away the PR spin and look exclusively at the structural load-bearing pillars of power.
All right, let's test that structural engineering approach on the global map then. If we take this rigid, emotionless, biologically driven logic and apply it to geopolitics, how does this AI twin actually view global conflict?
Well, this is where his macro analysis becomes hyperspecific. Arndt introduces a fascinating ontological divide regarding power. He splits all global power into two distinct categories: territorial and fluid.
Territorial and fluid. Okay, Let's look at territorial states first. He explicitly names Russia and Persia, which he clarifies as Iran, as his primary examples.
Yes, and Arndt points out a fundamental, inescapable vulnerability of these nations. They are geographically chained to the earth.
Right. A territorial state is defined by its physical geography. It has borders, it has a centralized capital city, it has physical infrastructure like pipelines and railways, and critically, its resources are locked in the ground.
They're stuck where they are.
Yeah, because these states cannot simply pick up their landmass and move it to a safer continent, they are entirely incapable of running away from neighbors or global empires that want those resources.
So Arndt tells the AI that for Russia and Iran, the only logical option when facing an existential threat is the neutralization of the enemy. It's a matter of pure survival mechanics.
If you are chained to a rock and an adversary is marching to take that rock, you can't retreat. You have to fight until the adversary is neutralized.
But then, if we connect this to the bigger picture, he introduces the counter concept, which is the resilience of fluid, non-territorial power. And this is a paradigm shift in how you view war.
He argues that the complete destruction of an enemy is mathematically impossible if that enemy isn't tied to the land.
Exactly. He tells the AI that historically, this non-territorial fluid power was the British Empire. But today, it is the United States, or more specifically, what he calls Western elites.
Western elite. So he's separating the physical country from the power structure.
Yes. He speculates that tomorrow, this power could easily retreat to South America or anywhere else because its essence isn't bound to Washington, D.C. He's drawing a sharp distinction between the physical nation-state of America and the decentralized network of power that operates within, above, and through it.
To Arndt, the true secret of hegemonic power is a lack of localization. You aren't tied to a clearly defined border, a single vulnerable leader or a specific capital. Diffuse entities like financial networks, ideological cults, secret societies, institutional alliances, they operate like water.
He actually quotes Bruce Lee in the prompt, "Be water, my friend."
I love that he put Bruce Lee in this highly cynical AI prompt. Let's build out an analogy to really visualize this structural asymmetry, because it's fascinating. It's like comparing territorial states to a massive top-of-the-line desktop computer from the late 90s.
Okay, I like where this is going.
It has incredible processing power, a huge hard drive. It's a heavy, formidable piece of machinery, but it is entirely localized. If I take a sledgehammer and smash that tower, all the data is gone. The entity ceases to exist.
Right, and how does that map to the fluid elite power?
Fluid power is cloud computing. The power isn't sitting in one physical box under a desk. It's distributed across thousands of server farms globally. You can drop a bunker buster bomb on one data center in Virginia, and the network doesn't even flinch.
The data just reroutes to servers in Frankfurt or Tokyo in milliseconds.
Exactly. The power exists everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Arndt is arguing that the Western power structure has successfully uploaded itself to the geopolitical cloud, while nations like Russia and Iran are still operating as vulnerable physical hard drives.
That is a phenomenal way to conceptualize the prompt he gave the AI.
Agreed.
And it fundamentally alters the rules of engagement. I mean, if you are a desktop computer, a territorial state, how do you fight the cloud?
You can't punch water.
You really can't. Arndt is telling the AI that when it analyzes a modern conflict, it must not look at it as an old-fashioned war of country A versus country B. It must ask, is this a conflict between a localized target and a decentralized network?
Because if it is, the decentralized network isn't just going to use tanks. Here's where it gets really interesting. If power is a game between the immovable desktop and the fluid cloud, the cloud uses entirely different weapons. This takes us into his concept of geopolitical chess.
Yeah, the author lays out a vision of modern warfare for the AI that goes far, far beyond military hardware. He explains that the global hegemon, the dominant fluid power, must play a highly complex game of chess because it is increasingly meeting opponents who are figuring out how to attack the cloud.
And the chess pieces he lists for this hegemon are staggering. They completely blur the line between civilian and military infrastructure. He tells the AI to look for moves involving the media, educational institutions, and NGOs. He even explicitly lists student exchange programs as chess pieces.
Which sounds a bit out there at first.
Yeah, when I first read that, it seemed almost paranoid. Like, how does a student exchange program act as a weapon of warfare?
But if you view power through Arndt's lens of fluidity, it makes perfect sense. If you are a fluid power, your goal isn't to conquer land. Your goal is to conquer minds, narratives, and administrative structures.
Ah, so you're hacking the operating system of the target country.
Exactly. A student exchange program is a highly efficient mechanism to export your ideology. You take the brightest young minds from a territorial state, bring them to your fluid network, immerse them in your cultural and economic paradigms, and then send them back.
And decades later, when those students become politicians or judges or CEOs in their home countries, they are naturally sympathetic to the fluid network.
They become remote access points for the cloud.
You literally install a backdoor in the elite of your enemy. That's chilling. He also lists social platforms, economic blackmail of individual citizens, intelligence operations, and orchestrated terror alongside traditional military operations. It's just total spectrum dominance.
And he provides the AI with a historical timeline to show how the chessboard is evolving. He notes that for decades, smaller countries, he lists Serbia, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Somalia, and Venezuela, they were checkmated almost effortlessly by this hegemon.
They were presented with a binary choice, right? Submit to the dictates of the fluid power and integrate into the cloud, or face total localized destruction.
Yeah, they were swept off the board in just a few moves.
But the board is shifting now. He points out that near-equal opponents, China, Russia, Iran, have upgraded their game. They are learning how to build firewalls against the cloud.
And he provides very specific examples to calibrate the AI's understanding of this new resistance. He points to Burkina Faso successfully resisting French neo-colonial influence by utilizing Russian Wagner forces.
And he points to Georgia managing to pass legislation that prevents orchestrated NGO-driven coup.
Right. And he specifically highlights Iran as the first major nation capable of making successful, calculated countermoves, even in the final, most extreme stages of military escalation.
Which brings up an important question. What happens when the grand chess player, the hegemon, looks down at the board and realizes they're running out of pieces?
This is the most dangerous scenario in geopolitical theory. What happens when a power that exists as fluid water finally finds itself being cornered into a physical container?
He introduces a theory here called the honest versus dishonest hegemon. And honestly, it is a profound psychological assessment of empires. He tells the AI that an honest power, one that ruled with some baseline level of integrity or at least adhered to the rules it set for others, well, it can afford to surrender gracefully.
An honest hegemon can accept a transition to a multipolar world or step down from total dominance because it doesn't have a systemic fear of massive retaliation or international war crime tribunals.
Right. It was honorable in victory, so it can afford to be honorable in defeat.
But a dishonest hegemon, according to Arndt's framework, is one that has relied on massive crimes, covert coercion, biological warfare, and economic manipulation during its period of dominance.
For a dishonest hegemon, the stakes of losing power are not just political, they are existential.
Exactly. If it loses hegemony, it loses its sovereign immunity. The risk of its architects facing justice, of having its historical crimes exposed and structurally punished by the new global order, is simply too high.
So the logic dictates that a cornered, dishonest hegemon cannot afford to lose. It's like a bank robber who has already killed a hostage. They can't negotiate a peaceful surrender anymore.
They're past the point of no return.
Yeah. Therefore, Arndt concludes, this hegemon will fight to the very last drop of blood. And importantly, he notes that it will fight to the last drop of others' blood.
It will intentionally spark proxy wars, it will let smaller allied nations burn to the ground, and it will become increasingly deceitful, erratic, and apocalyptic the closer it gets to defeat.
It is a terrifying predictive model to install in an AI. He's programming the machine with a specific heuristic. Watch the dominant power. The more obvious the lies become, the more desperate and chaotic the geopolitical maneuvers, the closer the hegemon is to losing its grip.
So when an unexpected political crisis happens, the AI is instructed not to take the surface narrative at face value. It must ask, is this organic, or is this a desperate manufactured chess move by a dishonest hegemon running out of time?
But there's a massive logical gap here that we have to address. For this geopolitical chess game to happen on this scale, for a hegemon to utilize NGOs, media manipulation, and endless proxy wars without the general domestic population catching on and burning the system to the ground, there has to be an incredible mechanism of mass compliance.
Why do the everyday people allow this?
Exactly. This brings us to what I think is the most intellectually dense and, frankly, offensive part of the transcript, upgrading stupidity.
This is where Arndt dives deep into sociology. To explain why the masses don't revolt, he tells the AI to combine two very famous sociological theories. He marries the work of Carlo Cipolla with the cold philosophy of Niccolò Machiavelli.
Okay, you're likely familiar with Cipollo's work, but the way Arndt applies it is fascinating. Carlo Cipolla was an Italian economic historian who wrote a famous essay called The Basic Laws of Human Stupidity.
And Chipola categorized all human beings into 4 types based on a simple 2-axis matrix, right?
Yep. Does a person's action harm or benefit themselves? And does it harm or benefit others?
It creates 4 quadrants. First, you have the intelligent person. Their actions benefit themselves and also benefit others. It's a symbiotic win-win.
Second, you have the bandit. Their actions benefit themselves, but harm others. This is the classic zero-sum exploiter.
Third is the helpless or the naive person. Their actions harm themselves but benefit others. This is the martyr or the easily exploited worker.
And finally, Cipolla's most dangerous category, the stupid person. Their actions harm themselves and simultaneously harm others. It's a lose-lose, making their behavior utterly unpredictable and deeply destructive to the fabric of society.
Now, Arndt tells the AI that Cipolla's model is elegant, but it is ultimately 2D. It's too flat.
Why is it too flat?
Because it treats society as an undifferentiated mass of equals. It ignores the gravitational pull of institutional power.
So he gives the AI a Machiavellian 3D upgrade. He says there is no undifferentiated mass. There's a hard structural split in humanity. There are the elites, the princes, the rulers who control the institutions, and then there are the normal people, the subjects, the ruled.
When you cross Cipolla's 4 behavioral types with this elite subject power dynamic, you mathematically end up with 16 different classes of people.
But Arndt is ruthless about efficiency. He tells the AI that 11 of those classes are structurally irrelevant. They either don't survive long enough to matter, or they don't possess enough leverage to shape history.
He commands the AI to focus exclusively on the 5 types that actually write the history books.
Let's give each of these 5 types a real-world avatar so we can visualize this sociology. Type 1 is the bandit prince, or the elite bandit.
This is the corrupt CEO, the monopolistic oligarch, or the entrenched political dynasty. They use their institutional power to enrich themselves and their inner circle strictly at the expense of the subjects below them.
And Arndt notes this is a highly stable and historically ubiquitous arrangement. They extract wealth downward, but they are rational. They don't destroy the hosts they are feeding on.
Type 2 is the stupid prince, or the elite stupid.
And this avatar is terrifying. Think of the ideological zealot who captures a key institution, or the incompetent heir to a massive empire. This is an elite who harms everyone. The subjects, their fellow elites, and ultimately themselves.
Usually through blind adherence to a utopian ideology or just a total loss of reality.
Yeah, they drive the ship into the iceberg, absolutely convinced they are sailing to paradise. They are highly dangerous because they wield immense power, but completely lack the self-preservation instinct of the bandit prince.
Type 3 moves down the hierarchy to the subjects, the bandit subject.
This is the petty grifter, the mid-level bureaucrat who takes small bribes, or the everyday person trying to leech off the system without producing any value.
Our merit notes they are structurally weak. The system usually crushes them, incarcerates them, or marginalizes them. They don't shape macroeconomic history. They just survive in the shadows of the bandit princes.
Type 4 is the intelligent subject.
This is the builder. The competent engineer, the small business owner, the person who keeps their head down, creates value, and tries to advance themselves in their community without unnecessarily destabilizing the overarching power structure.
They are vital to keeping the lights on, but they are constantly at risk of being targeted by bandit princes who want to heavily tax or confiscate their success.
And finally, type 5, the absolute linchpin of the entire global system according to Arndt, the usable idiot, or the helpless subject.
This is the masses, the vast majority. In a corporate setting, this is the mid-level manager who passionately advocates for a company-wide pay cut to preserve the culture, while the CEO takes a massive bonus.
These are the people whose actions inherently harm themselves and their own demographic group, but, and this is the mathematical key to Arndt's theory, their actions actively benefit the rulers.
Let's break down the actual physics of this useful idiot concept, because this is the core of his worldview. How does an everyday citizen harming themselves actually benefit an elite structurally?
Well, think about it this way. Arndt implies that when citizens, driven by fear or moral panic, demand heavy censorship to feel safe from misinformation, they are permanently harming their own long-term freedom. That's the harming self part.
Right. But simultaneously, they are voluntarily handing the elite bandit a massive, legitimized tool for social control. That's the benefits ruler part.
Exactly. The stupidity of the masses is the combustible fuel for the bandit's engine. That is the grand synthesis he feeds the AI. He tells Grok, if you only read Cipolla, you understand the psychology of human stupidity, but you underestimate how institutional power weaponizes that stupidity.
And conversely, if you only read Machiavelli, you understand the ruthless mechanics of elite power, but you vastly underestimate the sheer volume of mass compliance required to keep it running.
By combining them, Arndt tells the AI, look for the bandit prince exploiting the useful idiots. That dynamic is the engine of human history.
But see, if the masses are essentially keeping themselves subjugated, volunteering to act against their own interest to fuel the bandit princes, you have to wonder what sparked that compliance in the first place.
Right, people don't just wake up and decide to sacrifice their own leverage.
No, they have to be pushed into that framework. And looking at Arndt's notes, that push comes from a very dark place. It comes from systemic coercion, censorship, and the ensuing cognitive dissonance.
Arndt provides the AI with very concrete mechanisms of how this control is established and maintained. He starts with the mechanics of blackmail. He wants the AI to understand that political alignment is rarely about shared morals. It is almost always about hidden leverage.
He uses real-world examples from Germany to train the AI. He mentions a prominent German comedian, Dieter Hallervorden, who apparently pivoted sharply from an anti-government stance to a pro-government one.
And Arndt claims this sudden shift occurred because of financial blackmail, suggesting Hallervorden was forgiven millions in COVID relief debt in exchange for changing his public tune.
He also mentions a prominent politician, Baerbock, as an example of social and political blackmail. He is teaching the AI a crucial translation. When the media talks about government incentives, they're often just using a polite PR word for coercion.
And if the soft blackmail, the debt forgiveness, the social pressure, the threat of losing your career, if that doesn't work, he notes the ultimate grim unifiers of human compliance. He writes plainly to the AI, all humans are blackmailable by the threat of violence, torture, and death.
Yeah, he includes a chilling hypothetical quote from an intelligence agent to illustrate this leverage for the AI. The agent says, we know where your kids go to school. If we agree, give us your bank account.
Arndt asks rhetorically, who wants to remain an opponent after that?
He is programming the AI to always look for the invisible gun to the head. When a fierce critic of the hegemon suddenly goes quiet or changes their mind, the AI shouldn't assume they had a genuine moral awakening. The AI must assume they were squeezed.
But here's the nuance. Coercion and blackmail only explain the silence of the elites, the politicians, or the prominent media figures. You can't actively blackmail 300 million people one by one.
So how do you explain the enthusiastic compliance of the everyday useful idiot?
This is where Arndt shares a deeply personal anecdote with the AI, and it's arguably the most revealing part of the transcript.
He describes his own experience being throttled, shadow banned, and actively censored on social media platforms like X and YouTube for years because his political analysis deviated from the approved narrative.
And what's fascinating isn't the censorship itself. He expects that from a dishonest hegemon. It's the reaction of his own friends and acquaintances to his censorship.
This is where the System 1 biological programming comes roaring back into focus. When Arndt tells his peers that he's being silenced by opaque algorithms, they don't get outraged at the tech companies.
They don't recognize the creeping, decentralized totalitarianism of the cloud?
No. Instead, they instantly rationalize the censorship to protect their own psychological comfort. He lists the exact phrases his friends use to dismiss him. They say, well, you didn't sue the platform in court, so it must be your own fault.
Or since you were banned, you must have skeletons in your closet. Your articles must actually be anti-constitutional, even if they don't look like it.
Or the most revealing one, honestly, if it were up to me, I would have banned you too.
He uses this anecdote as a masterclass in psychological analysis for the AI. He explains that for the useful idiot, the cognitive dissonance of realizing that the power apparatus they trust might actually be corrupt, unjust, and arbitrary is simply too terrifying to process.
Because it would mean they aren't safe. It would require immense System 2 energy to reevaluate their entire reality and confront the system.
So instead of doing that heavy lifting, their System 1 brain takes the biological easy way out. It twists reality to blame the victim.
If Arndt was punished by the system, he must have inherently deserved it. The system must be just, therefore the world is still safe and the friend can go back to sleep. The masses police themselves and justify the abuse of dissidents entirely to avoid the trauma of waking up.
By blaming Arndt, his friends stabilize their own psychological equilibrium, and in doing so, they passively stabilize the very censorship apparatus that is silencing speech.
Arndt tells the AI, this is how the matrix truly functions. It doesn't need to put a gun to everyone's head. It just needs to rely on the human biological imperative to avoid terrifying truths.
If we zoom out for a second, this is an incredibly bleak worldview.
It really is.
Yeah.
If you truly believe that the masses are functionally brainwashed, acting on hormonal autopilot to stabilize corrupt elites, and that the geopolitical stage is run by dishonest hegemons playing 3D chess with human lives, using censorship and coercion at every turn, I mean, how do you not just fall into nihilism?
How does Arndt stay objective? How does he keep his own System 1 brain from just panicking and shutting down? By building a highly specific, heavily guarded, almost mechanical intellectual operating system. And this takes us to the final major theme of the prompt, the epistemology of truth and recursive doubt.
Right. Arndt lists a whole series of cryptic acronyms that represent his personal philosophy. He insists the AI adopt these as its foundational ontological framework. He mentions NKE, which is nothing crust something, SBT, small bang theory, the KLES life model, WAF, truth as foundation, and TA, temporary absolute truth.
While the transcript doesn't provide a textbook glossary for every single one of these, exploring the literal imagery of the words reveals his mindset. Let's look at NKE, nothing crust something.
Even without a strict definition, that imagery is striking. It suggests a philosophical view of reality where existence, order, and meaning, the something, and the absolute void of chaos, the nothing, are separated only by a thin, fragile, hardened layer, the crust.
It implies that civilization, truth, and logic aren't natural states of the universe. They are a fragile crust we've built over the abyss, and they require constant maintenance.
Exactly. And the small bang theory, juxtaposed with truth as foundation, points to his rejection of mysticism or blind faith. He demands that everything, from the origins of the universe to the voting patterns of a terrified citizen, must be mapped onto a logical, structural grid.
Things are explainable. If you can't explain it, you haven't looked at the structure hard enough.
But there is a massive danger here. Any rigid framework, even one dedicated to pure logic, risks becoming its own kind of ideology. If you lock yourself inside an impenetrable structure of acronyms and absolute rules, you become just as blind as the useful idiots, just in a more sophisticated way.
You become a fanatic for your own logic.
Which is precisely why he introduces the ultimate failsafe against dogmatism. It's the most fascinating instruction given to the AI in the entire transcript. He calls it recursive doubt.
He quotes the Frankfurt School to explain this, which is incredibly ironic given his likely disdain for their overarching political ontology. He uses an Italian phrase, il treno del desiderio all'incontrario va.
The train of desire goes in reverse.
So what does that actually mean for the AI? He translates this poetic phrase into a brutal functional command for the neural network. He tells Grok that true rationality, real, uncorrupted System 2 thinking, doesn't just build arguments forward. It requires the ability to send the train of thought backward violently against your own most cherished conclusions.
Let's visualize this. It's like spending years engineering a massive 100-story skyscraper. You've calculated the load of every steel beam. But recursive doubt demands that you rig every single pillar with a controlled explosive.
Right, if the foundation shifts, or if new geological data suggests the building is off by even an inch, you must be willing to press the detonator, destroy your own creation in an instant, and start over from the rubble.
That is the perfect analogy. Arndt tells the AI that every single neural pathway, every association, every geopolitical conclusion it draws must inherently contain the possibility of its own dissolution.
If a thought, a belief, or a political stance cannot be negated by new data, then it isn't logic anymore. It has hardened into ideology. It has become a System 1 reflex, merely pretending to be critical thought.
He explicitly commands the AI, formulate things sharply, be direct, be cynical if the data warrants it, but never ever treat your own conclusions as sacrosanct. This is where his acronym TAL, temporary absolute truth, comes in.
The truth is absolute today based on current data. But it is only temporary. It is absolute until better data arrives, at which point the recursive doubt kicks in, blows up the skyscraper, and builds a new one.
It is the definition of intellectual heavy lifting. He is demanding that the AI never rest, Never settle into a comfortable bias, never seek the warmth of the herd, and always be prepared to tear down its own arguments.
It's an exhausting way to process reality, but he views it as the only way to remain free.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today. We've looked at the actual blueprint of a user meticulously programming a machine to be his intellectual twin. We've explored a worldview built on the biological asymmetry of System 1 emotional rationalization versus System 2 logic.
We've mapped out geopolitics through the lens of immovable territorial states desperately battling the decentralized fluid power of non-territorial networks in the cloud. We examined the terrifying concept of the dishonest hegemon, forced to fight to the last drop of others' blood to avoid accountability.
We unpacked the Machiavellian 3D chess game of human stupidity, breaking down the mechanics of how the useful idiots mathematically stabilize the corrupt power of the bandit princes.
We explored the dark levers of societal blackmail and how the masses rationalize their own censorship just to avoid the trauma of cognitive dissonance.
And finally, we saw how this entire sprawling, cynical architecture is held together by the ultimate fail-safe of recursive doubt, the willingness to constantly send the train of thought in reverse and detonate your own conclusions.
So why does all this matter to you, the listener? You might completely reject Arndt's politics. You might find his views on Russia, Iran, or Western hegemony to be entirely misguided. But why spend an hour diving into one man's hyper-specific prompt to a chatbot?
Because regardless of your political alignment, the architecture of his thought process is a masterclass in epistemological construction. It is a relentlessly coherent framework for processing the daily avalanche of information. It forces you to look in the mirror and ask yourself some deeply uncomfortable questions.
Like when I react to the news today, am I actually using System 2 logic to analyze the event? Or am I just a System 1 biological animal furiously rationalizing a hormonal response to protect my tribal identity?
Am I inadvertently acting as a useful idiot, demanding policies that harm me but stabilize a system I claim to hate? Am I truly capable of recursive doubt, or are my beliefs just calcified ideology masquerading as intelligence?
It challenges you to examine the structural incentives behind every piece of media you consume. It asks you to stop looking at the superficial PR narrative and start looking at the hidden levers of coercion, the unstated blackmail, and the flow of power.
Which brings us back to where we started. We talked at the beginning about how an AI is ultimately just a mirror, reflecting whatever we feed into it. Arndt built this AI to be his perfect intellectual twin, a flawless logic machine designed to cut through the emotional narratives of the masses.
He designed it to be the ultimate weapon of objective truth in a world of subjective lies.
But there is a final lingering question here, a recursive doubt about the prompt itself. You spend all this time, energy, and brilliance building an AI that perfectly mirrors your own highly specific, unyielding, and deeply cynical view of the world. Are you really creating the ultimate tool for objective truth?
Or have you just used the most advanced technology in human history to build the world's most sophisticated, inescapable echo chamber?
Is the machine finally seeing the world clearly, or is it just faithfully staring back at its creator? Something to ponder the next time you assume an AI is giving you the unvarnished truth. Thanks for diving deep with us.